It has been 16 months since we last met in person. It's becoming a bit of a fading memory. When we first made the transition from in-person meetings to online meetings, David gave a great presentation on best and worst practices for online meetings. As we approach the time when we can once again meet in person, David would like to help prepare us for what to expect in his speech titled 20 Things You Forgot About When Giving a Speech to a Live Audience. Please welcome David Hobelwitz.
That's kind of awkward. Rule number 1, never leave an empty stage. It's kind of like a relay race. You always want to hand off the baton with a handshake for the next speaker before you step off the stage. How many of you have never given a speech in person? Great, all of you have. But it's been long enough that probably you will have forgotten some of these things. So I have 19 more tips you've probably forgotten or haven't learned yet. Starting off with, take off your name tag when you're going on stage. We know who you are because you were just introduced, and it's a little bit of a distraction. The Sergeant at Arms is going to be busy, by the way, creating these for us when we go back and meet in person. Wow, you've got the label on there. That'll be going away when we're actually together. Tip number 3, the clock doesn't start until you do. So take a moment, gather your thoughts, scan the room before you start. It's kind of like if you watch swim races when the timer says, swimmers take your mark. And then there's that awkward pause as you're waiting for the tone for the speakers to dive in. For the swimmers to dive in. That's how your speech can be. Tip number 4, you don't have to pin the timer because we've got one of these. And there will be a person sitting with this at the front of the room, timing you, letting you know where you are in your speech. And they'll be flipping the cards. Or in our club, we actually have a traffic light that shows green, yellow, red. So you won't need to worry about following the timer. But it is good to know how the timing works in person and how it's different from what we do online. Tip number 5, and this one's for the audience. And I'm looking around, and for those of you who are showing your camera, I'm not seeing a lot of note-taking. I presume you're not memorizing my speech, but know that when you're meeting in person, they're generally not recording it. So you need to take good notes. Have a pen and paper handy. Speaking of paper, when we meet in person, you'll have one of these, a printed copy of the agenda. You can use the backside to take your notes. So for those first 5, let me recap. Don't leave an empty stage. Don't wear your name tag on stage. Pause before starting. Understand your timer. And be prepared to take notes. Now let's talk about stage use. First thing you'll do is stand up. You should be standing all the time you're giving speeches anyway. When you're standing, use your whole body language, from head to toe. And by the way, when you're going from head to toe, you need to dress from head to toe. Don't dress halfway. And along with that, dress the part. When you're giving a speech, step it up a bit. Now you have a big stage. Use all of it. Walk to the left. Look at your audience to the right and walk to them and talk to them and address them. Use the whole stage. Number 9, the passage of time in our culture goes from the audience's left to right. That's the speaker's right to left. So as you give your speech, when it goes through a series of time, you should progress your speech from the audience's left to right. Tip number 10, positional reference. This is easier demonstrated than explained. For example, I'm giving a speech and I'm talking about, well, I was home and I went to my Toastmasters meeting and I realized I forgot something. Without telling you, you know it's home. I'm simply pointing back at that point, that location on the stage, and that is the positional reference. Now that can be a place, it can be a person, it can be a time, it can be a mood, anything like that. But this is something that you have the opportunity to take advantage of when you're speaking in person and you have a full stage. So to recap, stand up, use your whole body for body language, use all of the stage, time should pass from the audience's left to right, and take advantage of positional referencing. Now let's talk about eye contact. When you start off, you should be able to look around the room to your audience and look at them naturally, deliberately, and equally. That means from front to back and from left to right. Something that you may not remember when you were giving speeches in person, but some people have a tendency to talk to one side of the audience more than the other. So it's important to remember to talk to all of the audience more equally. And by now you will have realized that we're not all the same height as you appear on the screen. Oh, and another little side tip, don't wear your computer glasses. Tip number 13, keep your eyes off the ground. Your audience will think something less of you or doubt you or question you if you look like you're doubting or questioning yourself. And typically when you look down, people think you're questioning yourself. Unless it's deliberate. It might be an intentional point in your speech where you are supposed to look down, and then it makes sense. Don't turn your back on your audience. That's number 14. And number 15, there is no virtual background, no screen to share. Don't ask, can you see my screen? And you can't turn your camera off. To recap those 5, look around at your audience, hold meaningful eye contact, generally for about the length of one sentence, not too long, not too short. Don't look down, don't turn your back, and remember, the screen is always on. Now let's talk about voice. You need to project your voice so that the person at the back of the room can hear you without straining. That's very important if you want to get your message across to everyone in the room. Live voice is always more dynamic than what you're hearing through those computer speakers that you're getting right now. So use it. You can whisper and you can shout. It's okay. And it adds a lot to your speech by doing that you don't get when it's filtered through these little microphones. Number 18, if you have PowerPoint, talk to the people, not to the slides. Number 19, because there is no mic to unmute, and you won't have that problem. Finally, number 20, know your speech. That doesn't mean you have to memorize it, but know it. You can use notes. Notes are okay. Teleprompters are not. I've seen plenty of you giving your speeches, you know who you are, by reading them on your computer screen. Well, that doesn't work when you're meeting in person. Let me recap those 5. Project to the back of the room. Use vocal variety. Speak to the audience, not your PowerPoint. Don't mute yourself. And know your speech. Now I've got a bonus, number 21. Unless you're deaf, this is not applause. So I ask you now to put your hands together. You can do that. Right. That's what you're going to hear at the end of every speech. And if it's an icebreaker, it will be a standing ovation. Do you remember those? So let me give you a fast recap on that. Number 1, always shake hands before leaving the stage. Number 2, take your name tag off before going on stage. Number 3, pause before you start your speech. Number 4, get familiar with how the timing works. Number 5, be prepared to take notes. Number 6, stand up. Number 7, use your whole body and dress appropriately from head to toe. Number 8, use the stage, all of it. Number 9, as you use the stage, remember that time generally passes from the audience's left to right. Number 10, take advantage of positional reference. That's where my Toastmasters meeting was, and that's where home was. Remember? Number 11, make eye contact naturally, equally, and deliberately, front to back and side to side. Number 12, hold eye contact for about 1 sentence with any one person. Not too long, not too short. Don't look at the ground and don't turn around. Number 15, there is no screen to hide or share and no virtual backgrounds. Number 17, take advantage of the possibilities of the dynamics of live voice. Number 18, talk to the audience, not the PowerPoint. There's not forgetting anything about muting your mic or unmuting it. Remember to know your speech. And lastly, applaud loudly. So let's practice number 21 one more time. Do it. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I'm not leaving an empty stage. I'm waiting for you. Okay, maybe I'll have to wait until next meeting. Until then, back to you, Baxter.
Thank you, David. I love what you've done with that presentation.